I'm Claire and I'm 30. I'm sitting at my parents' Thanksgiving dinner table, watching my father slice turkey with the same confident smile he wore when he basically told me I wasn't worth saving. We used the money for Ethan's graduation party, he said, like he was discussing the weather. Family makes sacrifices. The medical fund my grandfather set up to keep me alive? Gone. Spent on streamers and a DJ for my brother's college celebration. But here's the thing that would make you laugh. If you weren't too busy being horrified, I'm not worried about me anymore. I'm worried about Mom. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like your family's afterthought. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how a family dinner turned into the moment I realized I wasn't the sick one anymore. 8 years ago, when I was 22, my body decided to stage a rebellion. What started as fatigue and joint pain became something the doctors called an autoimmune condition. Basically, my immune system thought my own organs were the enemy and launched a full-scale attack. I spent months in and out of hospitals, watching my parents pace hallways and whisper in corners about medical bills and insurance limitations. My grandfather, Dad's father, and the only person who never made me feel guilty for existing, watched the whole thing unfold. Grandpa was old-school wealthy, the kind who believed in taking care of family without making a big show about it. While my parents were calculating co-pays and arguing about which treatments we could afford, he quietly established what he called my health security fund, $50,000, specifically earmarked for any future medical needs related to my condition. This way, he told me during one of his hospital visits, his weathered hands holding mine, you never have to worry about getting the care you need. Your parents have enough stress without adding money to the mix. He made them co-trustees since I was barely functioning, let alone capable of managing finances. The agreement was simple. The money stayed untouched unless my condition returned. That was Grandpa's way, solving problems before they became catastrophes. He died 2 years later, but not before making sure his lawyer had ironclad documentation about the fund's purpose. My parents assured me they understood. They promised the money would be there when I needed it. They acted like responsible guardians of my medical future. What I didn't know was that they were already mentally spending it on other things. The recovery process took 3 years of my life. Physical therapy, medications that made me feel like I was living underwater, and a careful rebuilding of everything I'd lost. My energy, my confidence, my trust in my own body. My parents were supportive during this time, in their way. They drove me to appointments, picked up prescriptions, and only occasionally mentioned how much time they were taking off work for my care. But there were signs, even then, of the dynamic that would define our relationship. When I finally felt well enough to return to college, they suggested I choose something less stressful than my original pre-med track. When I landed my first post-graduation job at a medical device company, they worried it was too demanding for someone with my health history. When I got promoted to regional sales manager, they reminded me not to overextend myself. Meanwhile, my younger brother Ethan was encouraged to reach for the stars. Football in high school, engineering in college, and now a master's degree in business administration. Every achievement was celebrated, every goal supported, every setback met with reassurance and additional resources. The contrast wasn't lost on me, but I told myself it was natural. I was the one who'd been sick after all. They were just being protective. By age 25, I'd learned to navigate my condition well. Regular checkups, careful monitoring, and a healthy lifestyle kept me stable. My doctors were optimistic but cautious. Autoimmune conditions can be unpredictable. They reminded me. Sometimes they go into permanent remission. Sometimes they resurface without warning. The important thing was staying vigilant and having resources available if treatment became necessary again. That's when the requests started. Small at first. Could they borrow against the fund for Ethan's car? Just until Dad's bonus came through. Then bigger. Mom needed dental work not covered by insurance. Could we use some of the fund temporarily? They always had plans to replace the money. Always had explanations about why this particular emergency couldn't wait. I said no every time. Not because I didn't want to help my family, but because I remembered Grandpa's words about the fund's purpose. This wasn't general family assistance money. It was my medical insurance policy. My parents acted hurt by my refusal, like I was being selfish with money that could solve their immediate problems. You're healthy now, Mom would say. Mommy, you might never need that money. But what if I do? I'd counter. Well, we'll figure that out when the time comes. But I was learning something important about my family's definition of figuring things out. It usually meant expecting me to adapt while everyone else stayed comfortable. The years between 25 and 30 were the best of my adult life. I threw myself into my career with the kind of focus that only comes from surviving something terrible and being grateful for the opportunity to build something meaningful. My territory expanded, my client relationships deepened, and my income reflected the value I was bringing to the company. I moved into my own apartment. Nothing fancy, but entirely mine. No one commenting on my furniture choices or suggesting I was wasting money on organic groceries. No one questioning whether I was taking my medications correctly or getting enough sleep. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt like a complete person instead of a collection of symptoms and limitations. The family dinners continued, though less frequently now that I lived across town. Every few months, I'd drive over for Sunday lunch or holiday celebrations, and the dynamic was always the same. Ethan's latest achievements took center stage. His internship at a prestigious firm, his thesis project, his post-graduation job prospects. My successes were acknowledged politely but briefly, usually followed by concerned questions about my stress levels or work-life balance. "You look tired," became Mom's standard greeting. "Are you taking on too much?" "I'm doing great, actually," became my standard response. But the real tension was always about the medical fund. They'd stopped asking to borrow from it directly, but references to it peppered our conversations. Comments about how lucky I was to have that security. Observations about how unfair it was that Ethan had to take out student loans while I had money sitting unused. Suggestions that Grandpa probably would have wanted the money to help the whole family, not just me. I held firm, but it wasn't easy. Every reminder felt like a guilt trip wrapped in family loyalty. They made it sound like I was hoarding resources while they struggled, conveniently forgetting that this wasn't inheritance money or a family emergency fund. This was specifically designated medical insurance for a condition that could return at any time. My doctors reinforced this during annual checkups. Autoimmune conditions are unpredictable, Dr. Martinez reminded me during my 28-year-old appointment. We're monitoring certain markers that suggest your immune system could become active again. Having resources available for immediate treatment is crucial if that happens. I shared this information with my parents, thinking it might help them understand why the fund needed to remain untouched. Instead, it seemed to reinforce their belief that I was being unnecessarily cautious about something that might never happen. But here's what they didn't understand about living with an autoimmune condition. It's not just the physical symptoms you monitor. It's the constant low-level anxiety about when your body might betray you again. The hypervigilance about every ache, every moment of unusual fatigue, every sign that the carefully maintained balance might be shifting. Having that financial security wasn't just about potential medical bills. It was about peace of mind. It was about knowing that if the worst happened, treatment wouldn't be delayed by insurance battles or budget constraints. Have you ever experienced that kind of health scare that changes how you view everything? Let me know in the comments below. By the time I turned 30, I'd built a life that felt genuinely stable. My condition remained in remission, my career was thriving, and I'd developed a circle of friends who knew me as something other than the sick one or the careful one. I was dating a wonderful guy named Marcus who treated my medical history as just one fact among many, not the defining characteristic of my personality. I'd also established some healthy boundaries with my family. Monthly dinners instead of weekly visits. Shorter phone calls that focused on current events rather than rehashing my health status or their financial concerns. I helped when I could, contributing to wedding gifts, babysitting my cousin's kids, providing emotional support during tough times. But I'd stopped accepting guilt as a standard ingredient in family relationships. The medical fund remained untouched, earning modest interest in its dedicated account. Every 6 months, I reviewed the statements and felt that familiar sense of security. Dr. Martinez continued monitoring my blood work, watching for the specific markers that might indicate renewed autoimmune activity. Everything looked good, but we both knew that could change quickly. "The thing about your particular condition," she explained during my 30th birthday checkup, "is that stress can be a significant trigger. Major life changes, emotional upheaval, physical exhaustion, all of these can potentially reactivate your immune system. That's why maintaining stability in your life is so important." I thought about this as I drove to my parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner. The holiday had become somewhat tense over the years, with careful navigation required to avoid certain topics. Ethan was finishing his MBA program and would be graduating in December. The family was buzzing with excitement about his post-graduation plans, potential job offers, and the celebration party they were planning. I genuinely felt happy for my brother. Despite our different treatment growing up, I wanted him to succeed. He was smart, ambitious, and had worked hard for his achievements. The party sounded like it would be a wonderful way to mark his accomplishment and transition into professional life. What I didn't expect was to learn how they were funding this celebration. Mom greeted me at the door with her usual concerned expression. "You look thin," she said, studying my face. "Are you eating enough? You know how important nutrition is for your immune system." "I'm fine, Mom. Actually better than fine. I just got another promotion at work." "That's nice, honey. Just don't overdo it. Stress can be so dangerous for people with your condition." The reminder landed exactly as intended, a subtle reinforcement that my health was always at risk, always something to worry about. I'd grown skilled at recognizing these conversational patterns, but they still had the power to make me feel fragile when I'd been feeling strong. Dinner conversation followed its predictable pattern. Dad dominated the discussion with observations about politics and the economy. Mom updated everyone on neighborhood news and distant relatives' life events. Ethan shared stories from his final semester, including details about his thesis project and upcoming job interviews. I contributed when asked, but mostly listened, noting how the family dynamic still positioned me as the cautious one who needed protection, while Ethan was the ambitious one who needed support. It was during dessert that the conversation shifted to Ethan's graduation party. Mom's eyes lit up as she described their plans. A catered event at the country club, live music, professionally printed invitations for over 100 guests. Dad nodded approvingly as she listed the menu options and decoration themes they were considering. "It sounds amazing," I said sincerely. "Ethan deserves a real celebration after all his hard work." "We think so too," Dad replied. "Dad, nothing's too good for our graduate. We want this to be a party he'll remember forever." "The costs are adding up, though," Mom added with a slight frown. "The catering alone is more than we initially budgeted, and the band Ethan wants isn't cheap." I felt a familiar tension building. These comments were never random observations. They were testing the waters, seeing if I might offer assistance. But I'd learned to let these moments pass without jumping in to solve their financial concerns. "I'm sure you'll figure out how to make it work," I said diplomatically. That's when Dad's expression shifted to something I couldn't immediately interpret. Satisfaction, maybe. Or relief. "Actually, we already have figured it out," he said. "We're using your medical fund for the party expenses." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your grandfather's fund," Mom explained calmly, as if she were discussing grocery shopping. "We've decided to use it for Ethan's celebration. Family makes sacrifices for each other." The casual tone made it worse somehow. Not apologetic or sheepish, but matter of fact. As if using my medical emergency fund to pay for party decorations was the most natural thing in the world. "That money is specifically for my medical care," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Grandpa was very clear about that. Dad waved his hand dismissively. "You're healthy now. You haven't needed it in 8 years. Meanwhile, Ethan has a once-in-a-lifetime achievement that deserves proper recognition. What if my condition comes back? What if I need treatment?" "Well," Mom said with a slight shrug, "we'll figure that out if it happens." There it was. The phrase that perfectly captured their approach to my welfare. Something to figure out later, if at all. But what they didn't know was that I'd been keeping a secret of my own. The silence at the table stretched uncomfortably as I processed what they'd just told me. 8 years of financial security, gone. Spent on streamers and appetizers and a band for my brother's party. The fund that was supposed to ensure I could get immediate treatment if my condition returned, redirected to celebrate someone who'd never spent a single day wondering if his body might turn against him. I should have been furious. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt something unexpected. A strange sense of calm. Because sitting there, looking at my parents' expectant faces as they waited for me to accept their decision, I realized something they didn't know. "I need to tell you something," I said quietly. "About the test results from when I was first diagnosed." Mom frowned. "What test results?" "When I got sick 8 years ago, remember how the doctors tested everyone in the family? They wanted to see if anyone might be a compatible donor if I needed a transplant, and they also ran genetic markers to see if anyone else might be predisposed to developing the same condition." Dad's fork paused midway to his mouth. "They said the tests were normal. They said the tests showed no immediate concerns, but they also said you should follow up with your own doctors if any symptoms developed." I looked directly at Mom. "Did you ever actually read the detailed results?" "We got the summary report," Mom said defensively. "Everything was fine. The summary report said no immediate intervention was needed. The full report had more detailed information." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "Information I think you should see." I slid the papers across the table to Mom. Her face went pale as she read the highlighted sections, the genetic markers indicating early-stage autoimmune activity, the recommendations for annual monitoring, the notation that symptoms might not appear for years but early detection was crucial for treatment outcomes. "This says I should have been seeing a specialist," Mom whispered. "For the past 8 years," I confirmed. "But since you never followed up on the full results, we have no idea how far things have progressed." Dad leaned over to read the report, his confident expression faltering. "This can't be right. You would have told us if there was something serious." "I tried to tell you. Multiple times. But every time I brought up the test results, you changed the subject, or said the doctors had cleared everyone. You didn't want to hear details. You just wanted reassurance that the crisis was over." The truth was more complicated than that, though. I had tried to share the information initially, but their resistance had been so strong that I'd eventually stopped pushing. Part of me had hoped Mom would never develop symptoms. Part of me had been afraid of being seen as the daughter who created medical crises for the family. And part of me, if I'm being honest, had been waiting to see if they'd ever prioritize my welfare enough to ask the right questions. They never had. Now, looking at my mother's stricken face as she absorbed the implications of 8 years of missed monitoring, I felt something shift inside me. The daughter who'd spent years accepting blame for being a burden was disappearing. In her place sat a woman who understood exactly what was about to happen next. "We need to get you to a doctor immediately," I said to Mom. "I've already researched specialists in the area and made some preliminary calls." But that's when Dad's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before, and I realized this family crisis was just beginning. "What do you think will happen when someone who's never been the one needing help suddenly faces their own medical emergency? Drop your thoughts in the comments below." Dad's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, jabbing his finger at the medical reports. "You're trying to make us feel guilty about using that money by creating some fake emergency." The accusation hit me like a slap, but what really stung was watching Mom nod in agreement. Even faced with her own medical records, she was choosing to see me as the problem rather than acknowledge what was right in front of her. "These are official lab results from when I was diagnosed," I said calmly. "I didn't fake anything. I just actually read the paperwork you ignored." "You held on to this for 8 years?" Mom's voice carried a note of betrayal, as if I were the one who'd behaved badly. "You knew I might be sick and you didn't tell us?" And there it was. The family superpower of making everything my responsibility. Somehow, in the space of 5 minutes, I'd gone from being the victim of financial betrayal to being the villain who'd withheld crucial medical information. "I tried to tell you," I repeated, but I could see it was pointless. They'd already constructed their narrative, and in their version, I was the manipulative daughter using medical scare tactics to punish them for spending money that was rightfully mine anyway. Ethan, who'd been silent throughout this entire revelation, finally spoke up. "Can we just focus on getting Mom checked out? If there's really something wrong, arguing about it won't help." It was the most reasonable thing anyone had said all evening, and I felt a flash of gratitude toward my brother. Maybe this crisis would bring out the best in everyone. Maybe facing a real health scare would shift our family's priorities away from money and blame toward what actually mattered. I should have known better. What do you think will happen next? Will this family finally come together when it really matters? Drop your predictions in the comments below. Getting Mom to see a specialist turned into a 3-week battle that made me understand exactly why she'd avoided follow-up care for 8 years. Every appointment I arranged got canceled or rescheduled. Every doctor recommendation got questioned or dismissed. Every conversation about symptoms got deflected into discussions about how busy everyone was with Ethan's graduation preparations. "I feel fine," became Mom's standard response to any health-related question. "A little tired sometimes, but that's normal for someone my age." The fatigue, I learned from my own experience, was one of the first signs. Joint stiffness in the morning was another. The occasional rash she blamed on laundry detergent was a third. She'd been developing symptoms for months, maybe years, but had explained them away because acknowledging them would mean acknowledging that her body wasn't invincible. I finally had to make an appointment myself and drive her there personally, like she was a reluctant teenager being dragged to the dentist. Dr. Rodriguez, the rheumatologist I'd researched, was patient, but thorough. The blood work confirmed what the old genetic markers had predicted. Mom had the same autoimmune condition I did, but hers had progressed much further without treatment. "We need to start aggressive therapy immediately," Dr. Gee Rodriguez explained to both of us. "The inflammation markers are concerning, and there's evidence of organ involvement. With prompt treatment, we can halt the progression, but delay could result in permanent damage." I watched Mom's face crumble as the reality sank in. This wasn't something she could ignore or postpone or delegate to someone else. This was her body, her health, her life requiring immediate and expensive medical intervention. How expensive? She asked quietly. Dr. Rodriguez pulled out a treatment plan outlining medications that cost hundreds of dollars per injection, specialist visits twice a month, and monitoring tests every few weeks. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs would be substantial. And if complications developed, the expenses could spiral quickly. Do you have adequate health coverage for chronic condition management? The doctor asked. Mom looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear mixed with something that might have been regret. We'll figure something out, she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Walking to the parking garage after the appointment, she was unusually quiet. Finally, as we reached my car, she spoke. I guess this means you were right about keeping that fund separate. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to accountability I'd heard from either parent in years. The next few months became a crash course in chronic illness management. For Mom, but also for the whole family. Suddenly, everyone had to learn about treatment schedules and side effects and the kind of careful monitoring that had been part of my life for years. The difference was when I'd been sick. I'd handled most of the management myself, once I was stable enough. Mom, however, seemed to expect the family to rally around her care in ways they'd never rallied around mine. Dad took time off work for her appointments, something he'd rarely done during my illness. Ethan rearranged his class schedule to drive her to treatments when Dad wasn't available. Even extended family members called regularly to check on her progress and offer support. I found myself in the strange position of being both the family expert on this condition and the primary coordinator of Mom's care. She relied on my experience to navigate insurance approvals, understand medication side effects, and communicate with her medical team. I'd become her advocate and translator in a medical world that felt foreign to everyone else. You're so good at this, she said, after I'd spent 2 hours on the phone straightening out a prescription authorization issue. I don't know how you managed all this on your own when you were sick. The comment stung more than she probably intended. I had managed it on my own, largely because no one had offered the kind of comprehensive support she was receiving. But pointing that out now would only create more family tension at a time when Mom needed stability. Instead, I focused on getting her the best possible care. I researched treatment options, connected her with support groups, and helped her track symptoms and medication responses. I brought her soup when the treatments made her nauseous, and sat with her during the long infusion appointments when everyone else was busy. It was during one of these appointments that I met another patient named Susan, whose story made me see my own situation more clearly. My daughter Sarah is my lifesaver, Susan told me as we waited in the clinic's comfortable chairs. She's here for every appointment, handles all my insurance battles, even reorganized my kitchen so my medications are easier to manage. I don't know what I'd do without her. That sounds wonderful, I said. Sarah's lucky to have such an appreciative mom. Susan nodded enthusiastically. Oh, we've always been close. Even when her brother was going through his divorce and needed help with the kids, Sarah never wavered in taking care of me. Some people might think it's unfair that she does so much while he focuses on his own problems. But Sarah has such a gift for caregiving. It just comes naturally to her. I recognized the pattern immediately. The assumption that one child was naturally suited for sacrifice while another was entitled to prioritize their own life. The casual acceptance of inequality disguised as appreciation for someone's gifts. Does Sarah have a family of her own? I asked. She's single, which works out perfectly because it means she can focus on what's really important right now. Family comes first, you know. I nodded politely, but inside I was thinking about all the ways families convince themselves that unequal sacrifice is natural, even beautiful. How they frame one person's endless giving as evidence of their superior character rather than evidence of a broken system. Ethan's graduation party took place on a beautiful Saturday in May. The country club looked exactly as elegant as Mom had described, with professionally arranged flowers and a live band playing jazz standards. Over 100 guests mingled on the terrace, celebrating my brother's academic achievement and bright future prospects. I attended, of course. Despite everything that had happened with the medical fund, this was still my brother's big day, and I genuinely wanted to celebrate his success. I wore a navy dress I'd been saving for special occasions and brought a thoughtful gift, a leather portfolio engraved with his initials and graduation date. The party was beautiful and expensive and everything my parents had wanted it to be. Ethan looked handsome in his suit, graciously accepting congratulations and discussing his upcoming job at a prestigious consulting firm. Dad beamed with pride as he introduced his son to business associates and old friends. Mom, despite her recent health struggles, seemed energized by the celebration and the opportunity to show off Ethan's achievements. The irony wasn't lost on me that this lovely event, funded by my medical emergency money, was happening just 2 months after Mom's diagnosis had proved exactly why that money needed to exist. But I kept these thoughts to myself, smiled politely, and made conversation with relatives I hadn't seen in months. It was Aunt Linda who finally brought up the elephant in the room. "How are you feeling about your parents using your fund for this party?" she asked quietly when we found ourselves alone near the dessert table. "I'm focusing on Mom's health right now," I replied diplomatically. "That's very generous of you. I have to say, I was surprised when I heard about their decision, especially given what happened with your mother's diagnosis right afterward." I looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" "Well, it's quite a coincidence, isn't it? They spend your medical money, and then immediately need medical money, almost like the universe was making a point." The conversation was interrupted by the band announcing a special presentation. Dad took the microphone to give a speech about Ethan's accomplishments, his bright future, and how proud the family was of his dedication and hard work. The crowd applauded enthusiastically as Ethan joined his father at the front, looking both embarrassed and pleased by the attention. "None of this would have been possible," Dad concluded, "without the support of our entire family. We all make sacrifices for the people we love." The phrase "we all make sacrifices" echoed in my mind as I watched my brother bask in applause, funded by money specifically set aside to keep me alive. But what struck me most wasn't the unfairness of it. It was how naturally everyone had accepted that my sacrifice was expected, while Ethan's success was celebrated. The months following Ethan's graduation revealed a pattern I'd been too close to see clearly before. As Mom's treatment continued, the family dynamic settled into a familiar rhythm that had nothing to do with medical crisis and everything to do with deeply established roles. Mom's care fell primarily to me, not because I was the most medically knowledgeable, though I was, but because everyone else had more important responsibilities. Dad couldn't take too much time off work because his position was demanding. Ethan couldn't interrupt his new job orientation because first impressions were crucial. Extended family members offered emotional support and occasional visits, but the day-to-day management landed squarely on my shoulders. I handled her medication schedules, tracked her symptoms, drove her to appointments when transportation was needed, and fielded the inevitable insurance complications that come with chronic illness treatment. When her treatments made her too tired to cook, I brought meals. When side effects kept her awake at night, I was the one she called at 2 a.m. for reassurance. "You're such a natural caregiver," became the family refrain. "Claire has always been so responsible. Claire understands these medical things better than anyone. Claire has more flexibility in her schedule." The last one was particularly telling because it wasn't true. My job was demanding, my schedule was full, and my own health required ongoing monitoring. But somehow my responsibilities were seen as more flexible than everyone else's. My time as more expendable, my sacrifice as more expected. Ethan, meanwhile, was thriving in his new position. His calls home were filled with stories about client presentations and team projects and business travel opportunities. When he visited, the conversation centered on his experiences and future prospects. Mom and Dad hung on every detail, proud of his professional development and excited about his trajectory. The contrast became most apparent during our monthly family dinners, which had resumed once Mom felt well enough to host again. Ethan would arrive with stories and updates that commanded the table's attention. I would arrive with medication reminders and appointment schedules that were appreciated but hardly discussed. "How's your job going, Claire?" Mom would ask politely, usually while clearing dishes or organizing pills. "Really well, thanks. We just landed a major contract with—" "That's nice, honey. Ethan, tell us more about that conference you're attending next week." And just like that, my achievements became conversational filler, while his remained the evening's entertainment. It was during one of these dinners that I finally understood something crucial about our family dynamic. The problem wasn't that they loved Ethan more than me. It was that they'd assigned us roles so long ago that they couldn't see us as anything other than those roles. He was the achiever, I was the caregiver. He was the success story, I was the support system. He was the investment, I was the infrastructure. The moment of complete clarity came 6 months after Mom's diagnosis, during a conversation that started like dozens of others we'd had about her care schedule. "I need you to drive me to Dr. Rodriguez next Thursday," Mom said over the phone. "Dad has a golf tournament, and Ethan's too busy with that big presentation at work." I checked my calendar, mentally rearranging meetings I'd need to reschedule. "What time is the appointment?" 2 o'clock. "Oh, and can you pick up my prescriptions afterward? I'm running low on the expensive ones." Of course. I'd become expert at navigating the specialty pharmacy where her medications cost more per month than many people's rent. "How are you feeling overall?" "Much better, actually. Dr. Rodriguez says my numbers are improving steadily." Her voice brightened with genuine relief. The treatment is working really well. I felt a surge of happiness for her. Whatever else was complicated about our relationship, I genuinely wanted her to be healthy and comfortable. That's wonderful news, Mom. It really is. You know, I keep thinking about how lucky we are that you were so persistent about those test results. If you hadn't pushed for me to get checked out, who knows how much worse this could have gotten. The acknowledgement felt good, but it also highlighted something that had been bothering me for weeks. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. When I was sick 8 years ago, do you remember how the family handled my care? A pause. What do you mean? We did everything we could to help you. I know you did. But do you remember who handled the day-to-day stuff? The appointments, the medications, the insurance calls? Another pause. Longer this time. Well, you were an adult. You handled most of that yourself. I was 22 and barely functional from treatments. I handled it because I had to, not because I wanted to or because it was easy. Claire, where is this coming from? Are you feeling overwhelmed with helping me? Because I can ask your father to. It's not about being overwhelmed, I interrupted gently. It's about noticing patterns. When I needed care, I was expected to manage independently as soon as possible. When you need care, the whole family rallies to support you. When Ethan needs financial help, money appears. When I needed financial help, I was told to figure it out myself. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Mom finally responded. I think you're being a little unfair. Every situation is different. And there it was. The family catchphrase that explained away every double standard. Every situation was different, which meant the rules changed depending on who needed what. Some people got support, others got expectations. Some people got investment, others got reminders about responsibility. You're right, I said quietly. Every situation is different, and I'm different now than I was 8 years ago. What does that mean? It means I'm going to start making choices based on what's healthy for me, not just what's convenient for everyone else. That conversation happened on a Tuesday. By Friday, I'd made 3 decisions that would reshape everything. First, I hired a professional care coordinator to help manage Mom's medical schedule. She could afford it now that her treatment was stabilized, and it would free up my time while ensuring she got excellent care. Second, I booked a vacation, my first real break in years, to visit a college friend in Seattle. No family emergencies, no medical crises, no guilt trips about abandoning my responsibilities. Third, and most importantly, I started therapy with Dr. Sarah Chen, a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting. Healthy families, Dr. Chen explained during our first session, distribute both support and expectations fairly. When one person becomes the designated helper while others become the designated helpies, that's not love, that's dysfunction. It took me months of weekly sessions to fully understand how deeply I'd internalized the role of family sacrifice, how I'd confused being needed with being valued, confused helping with healing, confused loyalty with self-destruction. The breakthrough came during a session where Dr. Chen asked a simple question. If your family genuinely appreciated your sacrifices, how would they show it? I thought for a long time before answering. They'd ask about my life, not just my availability. They'd celebrate my achievements, not just use my skills. They'd respect my boundaries instead of testing them. And do they do those things? The answer was obvious, but saying it out loud felt revolutionary. No, they don't. That's when I finally understood that love without respect isn't actually love. It's exploitation disguised as family loyalty. Real love considers the other person's welfare, not just their usefulness. I didn't cut contact with my family dramatically or make grand pronouncements about their behavior. Instead, I simply started treating myself the way I'd always treated them, with consideration, respect, and genuine care for my own well-being. I moved to Seattle 6 months later, not to escape my family, but to build a life that was entirely my own. A life where my time and energy and resources belonged to me first, and others second. A life where being healthy meant more than just managing symptoms. It meant managing relationships too. Mom's condition remained stable. Ethan's career continued flourishing. Dad's golf game improved significantly with all that extra practice time. And me? I learned that sometimes the best cure isn't medical at all. Sometimes the best cure is distance, boundaries, and the radical act of putting yourself first. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Sometimes the family that heals you isn't the family you were born into. Sometimes it's the family you choose for yourself.